Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another Best of BHN. Best of the best of the best of BHN. Tonight we are looking at June, one of my favourite months, because there is somebody's birthday in that month. Pretty important month of the year for me. Just putting it out there. As we're doing these episodes, in case you're a first timer, we're doing a best of through this Christmas New Year period. We're doing 11 shows, so we're doing 11 of the months. We're not doing December because obviously December just happened. But tonight we are looking at what happened in June, some of the big stories from BHN. Some of those big stories were maybe this is the start of the ferry conversation. Maybe it was June, because one of the stories tonight is the government told they need new ferries just after cancelling Labour's new ferries. Remember? Second-hand Corolla, and then they got told you can't actually do it. You need new ferries as well. Yes, and that conversation goes on right till the end of the year. Luxon gets a bit pissy on RNZ tonight and demonstrates National's new tell. National had lots of tells this year, lots of repetitive lines they used. For Luxon, one of his tells is he starts to repeat and starts to, what I would say, I was demonstrating there what he kind of does. That's one of his personal tells. Also, what else? New Zealand hated Jacinda so much that they voted in a new Prime Minister who they hate, just to stick it to Labour. That's a story from tonight. Obviously, some polling out of June. And finally, Osian Llywelyn. This is probably one of my highlights of the year, because this was in an age or a time where we were talking about this government wanting to minimise the Māori language. Remember that? Make it secondary to English. And so I had this little thought. I wonder what other countries that have an indigenous language and an English language do. Well, Wales is one of those countries. And Osian Llywelyn is the Deputy Welsh Language Commissioner and Director of Regulation on promoting the Welsh language. Now, we were kept getting told here in New Zealand that everyone speaks English. It has to be clear for people. Well, the majority of people in Wales speak English as well. So we were just wondering what a different country does. And the trends that seem to be getting shown when that indigenous language is, for want of a better word, white, versus that indigenous language being a brown society. Because you think about those places, New Zealand, Australia, USA, they don't seem to really value, and in fact, in this country are devaluing more and more their indigenous language, which is not a European language. So what are they like in those European countries? What are they like in Scotland? What are they like in Ireland? What are they like in Wales? Where the people today look more like the indigenous people. It's a very interesting conversation, probably my favourite interview of the whole year. Let's kick off with that, shall we? Let's kick off with that. So Osian Llywelyn, the Deputy Welsh Language Commissioner and Director of Regulation on promoting the Welsh language, on how they treat their indigenous language versus English. Very happy to welcome to the show the Deputy Welsh Language Commissioner and Director of Regulations, Osian Llywelyn. Now, before we start, Osian, educate me in how to pronounce your surname correctly.
You would pronounce it Llywelyn, so the double L at the beginning of my name would be a as opposed to a L.
Llywelyn. Is that it? Llywelyn.
That's right.
It's fascinating, because you have that kind of indigenous way of pronouncing things here in New Zealand. Obviously, Māori is our indigenous language, and the WH can be an F sound, and unless you're a native speaker, you have no idea. And being a non-native speaker trying to pick up like an indigenous language from the other side of the world is difficult at best. But look, thank you so much for joining me this morning, your time. I'm really interested to find out about how other countries, I don't know if treats their indigenous language, but interacts with, legislates around even their indigenous language, especially if it's a minority language, as we have in New Zealand. What percentage of people in Wales are fluent in Welsh?
Okay, I think there's that's a question that I would answer in two different ways. We have a census, which is published every 10 years, and the last census was published in 2021, and the number of people who identified themselves as Welsh speakers as part of that census was just under 18% of the country. However, that is a self-assessment process in terms of the census, and we also have an annual population survey, and there is the latest results in that population survey back in September of last year, September of 2023. That survey estimated that around 29% of people aged 3 years or over were able to speak Welsh. So there are some discrepancies in terms of the statistics, but I think generally we are looking at around the 20% mark of people who identify as Welsh speakers.
Is the discrepancy between the 18% to the 29%, is that maybe people who use Welsh often and commonly, but maybe aren't fluent? Like, so here in New Zealand, most people use Māori day-to-day language. Like, you know, everyone speaks it, but only maybe 5% are fluent. Could that be the differential between the 19 and the 29?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think there are discrepancies and there are differences in the way that people report their use of the Welsh language, and that can be influenced, I guess, by various factors. That includes, the context in which the question is asked. Sometimes the way that those questions are asked from in terms of the census and other surveys differ, and that will inevitably trigger slightly different responses from people. The perceived importance of the language for individuals, and obviously the way that people identify, I guess, with Welsh culture. Those are, various factors that I guess that can influence that discrepancy.
Gotcha. Now, the Welsh Language Commissioner has a website, and what I noticed on the website is the Freedom to Use Welsh section. For people who are listening to the audio podcast, it says, if you wish to communicate in Welsh, e.g. when speaking or writing with another individual, you should be able to do so without interference. And it lists a few examples of doing that. That says to me that perhaps there's been a resurgence, a revival of the Welsh language over the last 100 years. Has this been something that Wales has lost and has had to try and find and build back up to where you are today? Or has it always been around at sort of 20, 30% of people spoke it?
Well, I guess you referred to the provision there around the freedom to use the Welsh language, and that's certainly a key feature of our current legislation that the Commissioner operates under. That's the Welsh language measure that was passed back in 2011, and that replaced previous pieces of legislation and we've gradually built on existing legislation. We had a piece of legislation back in 1993. The previous Welsh Language Act after that was 1967. So there has been a strengthening of Welsh language requirements in terms of what public bodies are expected to do in terms of delivering services through the medium of Welsh. Okay. And obviously the culmination in 2011, the Welsh language measure not only established that principle, that legislative principle that people have the freedom to communicate with others in Wales through the medium of Welsh, but it also established the Welsh language as an official language, and it has official status in Welsh, therefore.
Is this idea of growing, building, making the Welsh language sort of being able to be used legally, I guess you'd say, a right to use it, is it a political football? Like, are there parties that are sort of English first or think that Welsh is a dead or dying language? Or is everyone in agreement in the kind of Welsh political world?
I think in any democracy there are a range of views. I think certainly from our Senedd, our Welsh Parliament, there is a cross-party consensus in terms of the government's aims to in its strategy for the Welsh language to increase the number of Welsh speakers to a million by 2050, and to increase the daily use of the language. The government has a target to double that from 10% to 20% of the population using Welsh on a daily basis by 2050. And I think, as I said, there is a cross-party consensus and broad support to those aims.
So by cross-party, you mean both what some people would describe as either on the left or the right. They're all in agreement and generally with what Wales is trying to do.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think there's a cross-party consensus to the aims and how we go about that. There may be some different views around various policy areas in relation to the language, but as I say, I think the broad aim of increasing the number of people in Wales who are able to use the language, and that we take proactive steps to increase not only the opportunities that people have to use the Welsh language, whether that's through services with public organisations, but also, importantly, increasing the daily use of that language here in Wales.
By daily use, is that what I was referring to earlier about, how we use Māori here in New Zealand by just interspersing it? It's almost like a mix of Māori and English. It just gets interspersed with, and everyone kind of uses it. Well, most people intersperses Māori words with English. Is that what you mean by daily use, or are you saying fluent speakers daily use?
Well, I think education is a central function to the government's broad aim of reaching 1 million speakers, and what the government here in Wales wants to see is the education system, people who leave statutory education, that they leave as confident Welsh speakers. Now, there are levels of confidence, but certainly what the government wants is that people are able to feel confidently to use the Welsh language, and that they do that on a daily basis. Now, that will vary from cohort to cohort, but what we want to see is people leaving statutory education as confident Welsh speakers.
Is this the feeling? And I've got the you guys had a conference recently, 2024, of the International Association of Language Commissioners. Is this the same sort of objective? Is this the same sort of drive that we're looking on the site now of places in Canada or in Spain or in Kosovo? Et cetera, et cetera. Ireland's there as well. In fact, Canada's there numerous times. That's interesting. Is it the same kind of feeling you get from all of those same language commissioners? There's a drive to make people use the native language more, and they want to see the use of native language grow more?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, the International Association of Language Commissioners was a really important development, and it's allowed us language commissioners who work, albeit in different contexts, but have ultimately the same aim, which is to promote and facilitate and celebrate the use of our minority and native languages and official languages in our respective countries. It's been a real important development, and it's given us the opportunity to learn from each other, from our own experiences. As I say, we all work in slightly different contexts, whether that's culturally or legislatively. Clearly we have a strong Welsh language piece of legislation which imposes duties on public bodies to deliver services through the medium of Welsh. And the conference that we had earlier this month, that was the 8th conference that the association has held. That was in Cardiff. It was an opportunity for us to demonstrate and to show how those legislative changes in the last 10 to 15 years has really transformed that agenda in terms of the opportunities that people have to use the language when accessing public services, when using the language in the workplace, for example, but also more broadly in communities across Wales.
As I peruse the members of that association, I noticed New Zealand's not there. Any ideas why that we're not a part of that? Is it on our end that we just haven't signed up, or?
I think it would be wonderful to see representation from New Zealand on our Association of Language Commissioners. We very much welcome new members, whether those are observing members or otherwise. So the more the merrier, and we'd very much welcome representation from your country as part of that association.
I think it's amazing that we've been talking for 10 minutes or so now, a man from Wales and a man from New Zealand, and we haven't talked about rugby once, especially because the All Blacks were just announced today, but we won't go there because I was thinking Cardiff. This made me think about that. If I'm walking through Cardiff and I'm seeing street signs, road signs, school signs, hospital signs, am I seeing Welsh? Am I seeing English? Am I seeing both? How does it work?
You would see both languages on any signs that are displayed publicly, and that is the responsibility of government, local authorities, local health boards. You mentioned schools and education there. There is a statutory legal requirement on any signs that are displayed in public to be bilingual, with an emphasis on the Welsh language appearing first on those signs.
So that's a literal Welsh language first policy as opposed to the reverse.
There is a requirement on public bodies when putting signs up, new signs, and replacing all signs, that those signs have the Welsh language appearing first. But they are bilingual signs. And
sorry to make an absolutely pedantic question, because this is what's happening in New Zealand a little bit at the moment, the font between the English and the Welsh, is it exactly the same? Is Welsh, it needs to be a bit bigger than the English? Does that make any difference?
No, I think the regulations that we have in place, which places these legal duties on public bodies, they stipulate that when you do produce bilingual signs, that the Welsh language should be treated no less favourably than the English language, and that's in terms of font size, etc. So they are equal in that sense.
Is this conversation kind of a bit weird to you? Because the reason I'm asking these questions is we've had a government that's come in recently who is doing the opposite. They're literally saying English first on signs. They're renaming some of our government institutions to have the English name first. And that's why I'm, as a podcaster and journalist, kind of going, is it just us? Is it just this political party? Or is this what's happening around the world? Which is why I'm wanting to speak to guys like you. What would happen in Wales if a political party, ardently stood up and said English will be first, English will have priority on road signs in government departments? Would that get traction amongst society or not?
No, I don't think that's the case. As I said, in any democracy, there will be a wide range of views. But I think, broadly speaking, I think the people of Wales are supportive of the Welsh language and the ambitions and the aims of government, but also other key stakeholders who have a keen interest in the Welsh language, most notably ourselves as the Welsh Language Commissioner. There is broad support for the promotion of the Welsh language, and bilingual signs and things like that are key features of that agenda.
I know this is probably, someone comes to New Zealand, they go, oh, where's Lord of the Rings? And it gets really tiring after a while. And I'm sure this is the same for you guys, but I love watching Welcome to Wrexham on whatever channel it's on. And the explanation, like they talk about the Welsh word for the corner store, the English word is the corner store, the American word is the 7-Eleven. I love that. And I think that's just, and I know that's not to do with legislation or anything, but just to see that, it fills me with kind of, oh, that's such a nice way to show how the culture that they're showing through on that docuseries is actually unique to that country. And it's one of the things within that country that you'll only get in that country. So why wouldn't you want to highlight it? It's fantastic.
Yeah, I have to confess that I haven't seen the Welcome to Wrexham series. As a Swansea City fan, another club in Wales, my interest in Wrexham is perhaps not as high as those in North Wales. But it's a fantastic platform, isn't it? And Wrexham, we had a visit from Taylor Swift to Cardiff last week. She was performing in the Principality Stadium here in Cardiff, and used the Welsh language to converse with the audience, and those sorts of things are real positives in our efforts to promote the language and to mainstream the language, and to make it a living language. And I'm conscious of the efforts that Wrexham Football Club are doing to actively promote the language in their own communities as well, but also on platforms like Netflix, that brings the language to a significantly wider audience, doesn't it?
Definitely. Hey, as your involvement with the Association of Language Commissioners, which means you get a chance to peruse the world on some level when it comes to indigenous languages, native languages in different countries. Do you have any opinion on why it feels like places like Australia, USA, and New Zealand, there is a vibe, there is an underground vibe which has enough popularity that it can be put into legislation through a political aspect as to wanting to literally squash and suppress our native languages? Do you have any thoughts around that? Have you seen anything that could explain that?
Oh, that's a difficult question and perhaps a slightly political one. I certainly think, we here in Wales are part of a broader United Kingdom, and clearly English is the dominant language,
Sure.
if you like. And I mentioned earlier some of the journey that we've been on in terms of legislation. The current legislation we have from 2011, previous pieces of legislation which aimed to address and redress perhaps some of the historical consequences as to why the Welsh language was indeed a minority language and spoken by, we saw continuous decrease in the use of the Welsh language over the course of history. So there has been, sustained efforts from governments both at a UK level and post-devolution here in Wales to redress that, and as I say, to promote and facilitate the use of the Welsh language. We've seen a huge rise in Welsh medium education, for example. There are requirements on local authorities to proactively promote Welsh medium education amongst their citizens. We've got a Welsh language education bill that is going to be laid in front of our Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, later this summer, and we hope that will become law by the end of 2026. So there are steps taken by government, certainly here in Wales, over the course of the last 50 years to strengthen Welsh language requirements, impose duties on public bodies, but also that broader agenda of promoting and facilitating the use of the language and making that language certainly a more visible one here in Wales, which again is a response, I guess, to our history as a nation.
I had one other question, but just that you've said, as you've just said, that it makes me think, what does it add to a country to actually embrace its indigenous language?
Well, I think the people of Wales, we recognise that we are a bilingual nation. We are a nation, we're a bilingual nation, but there are other languages that are spoken in Wales. But there are 2 official languages here in Wales, and it's important that we celebrate the language. The language is an inherent part of our nation's culture, and I think it's important that not only do we recognise that, in legal terms, but also in broader terms, but that we celebrate that. And I think the work that the International Association of Language Commissioners, for example, do. We learn from our experiences in various jurisdictions, but it's also an opportunity for us to celebrate the successes in respective jurisdictions. So I think it's really important that we embrace our culture, that we celebrate it, and that we give people the opportunities to use that language.
Last question, if you would like to play a game with me. And the game is, imagine you've finished working for the Welsh Language Commissioner and you're now out consulting to other countries as to why they should embrace their indigenous languages. Here in New Zealand, we have a government at the moment who, it's not that they're not embracing it, but they're making sure that English comes first. What advice would you give to them in this split parallel multiverse as to why they should perhaps think about embracing our Māori language, or perhaps whatever country it is, their indigenous language more heartily?
Well, I think, from our experience, look back to 2011, we're 15 years into this piece of legislation. And I think from our experience, we've seen a real step change in terms of the way that organisations deliver services through the medium of Welsh. And what that has meant is that the people here in Wales have more opportunities to use the Welsh language when they access services. They can see the Welsh language, whether that's on signs. They are able to access websites from public bodies. They are able to use the language in their everyday lives. And I think that's been we've seen a real step change in that sense. And as I said, I go back to the point I was making in response to your earlier question. I think it's really important that, any government reflects the culture and the values of that country, and language is an inherent part of that culture. So I think, it's important for any government to take proactive steps to promote minority official indigenous languages.
The Deputy Welsh Language Commissioner and Director of Regulations, Osian, help me again, because I'm going to say Llywelyn. Give me one more lesson before we wrap up.
Osian Llywelyn.
Llywelyn.
Fabulous.
Okay, that's okay.
Fantastic.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I've really, really appreciated your insights.
Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Hey, g'day again, team. Hope you're enjoying the best of in this Christmas New Year break period, the best of BHN 2024. Just wanted to remind you as well that the merch shop is open during this time period. One of the ways we support ourselves and pay a few bills is obviously through the merch that we sell. We are sending out merch all the way through this Christmas period. So if you want to head to bhnshop.nz, you can see that there are some Chewie Fufu shirts there, Chewie blowing his fufu, some Nicky No Boats product there, both t-shirts and hoodies, buffer gear there as well, t-shirts and hoodies, and also the pattern Chewie BHNs. The other thing that's become quite popular in this last wee while is the sticker range we've got as well, which mirrors the merch on the t-shirt range that we've got. Again, we will be sending out merch during this Christmas New Year period. So if you order it, it will be on a courier or on the post or whatever you call it, certainly within a few days, and we'll get it off to you. You'll also find a few specials on that for limited stock. The stock, especially in the hoodies, is limited. It's actually limited in everything, but more so limited in the hoodies. So if you head to bhnshop.nz quickly to make sure you secure what you want from the merch that we have currently going. Thanks for supporting us through 2024. Let's get back to some more of the best ofs. Friday, when we left, we got an announcement that a ferry had broken down and that the government was advised that week to replace the Cook Strait ferries with new, smaller boats. To which I on Twitter responded by going, bah, ha, 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 ha. Is it too early for a we told you so? To which someone, obviously the memes went crazy over the weekend, and this was kind of my favourite one. For those of you in the audio podcast, it's a picture of the bottom of the North Island and the top of the South Island, and a ferry going into the water like Titanic. And Nicola Willis saying, "Thank goodness we saved that $3 billion on the new ferries, because we're going to need that $4 billion to fix this fecking big pothole," which is quite funny. I quite like that one. It's kind of hilarious, actually. And yes, there are some differences between what they've been advised and what was going to be purchased. And yes, what was going to be purchased wouldn't have been here till 2026. But we told you so. We said there will be an incident, and I was playing uber pessimist, actually. I think I said, who knows what it'll be? It'll be a breakdown, or at worst case, it could be a death. Something goes wrong, and you will have to lump it. And today, the more I hear interviews today about the Inter-Islander, things like, aren't we so lucky it broke down or ran aground in an actual harbour in the Sound? We have no tugboats that can do anything in the actual strait. Both the tugboats in Wellington and the tugs that are in Picton area, they're only in harbour tugs. So this ferry, although when people have been saying that, aren't we lucky it didn't happen in the middle of the strait? I'm like, well, how are you going to run aground in the middle of the strait? Let's just be fair. But let's just point to the failing infrastructure that is the ferries. How to have if they have a problem in the middle of the strait, there's actually nothing there that can help them. Chewie, This is the problem. And I don't quite know all the numbers that are being bandied about now, and all the kind of political, yeah, we can do this, we'll get some new ones, and how much they're going to spend. we'll get into that over the next few minutes. Let's just start with TVNZ tonight and their coverage of the actual situation. And then there's a tag on at the end of about 90 seconds with them talking about how National is responding to this. And what National is doing is kind of going, yeah, it's all good. Yeah, we're on top of this. It's no problems at all. And you kind of go, really? Are you? Let's have a look.
The grounding of the Aratere has once again ignited calls for an ocean-capable tugboat in Cook Strait. The Picton Harbour tugs played a key role refloating the ferry. Many say it's lucky an incident didn't happen in the open ocean. Here's Jessica Roden, who covered the story throughout the weekend.
A Monday morning clean-up after a long weekend.
It takes a lot of manpower, and as people are tired from the weekend's activity, we're just going to slowly bring the gear in.
Packing away equipment that was fortunately not needed.
A lot of our oil spill equipment is stored in here, so at the back you can see some of the land sea booms that were deployed.
Teams in Picton today debriefing after working around the clock from the moment the Aratere ran aground.
I have had some sleep.
We've got to ask the question as well. I'm sure it'll come out in the investigation. Just going back, oh gosh, that went along. Oh gosh, what have I done? How the heck did it run aground like that? I mean, they're talking about it running aground. There we go. There's the image I was looking for. Running aground. I mean, that looks like it's not just run aground, but lost complete control and drifted into, like, that's not the route that he's driving, he or she, whoever the captain is there, to be pushed into the wall like that. I'm assuming they either lost power and drifted in, or something happened. So this could have happened. Go tell.
So a couple of weeks ago, they were upgrading their steering gear, and it looks like the steering has failed at this point. So actually,
the running aground means nothing. Actually, it's the failed steering, and that could have happened in the middle of the strait. So this is what we're dealing with: a not fit for purpose infrastructure that is going to continue to break down and be a hazard to the people using it. But
well, this is the second incident in the last, what is it? Is it 8 months? We had a different ferry lose power in the strait completely, and the Aratere had a problem with the propeller. I think less than 12 months ago. So, you know, we are rolling the dice each time.
And just remember, as long as we get a nice second-hand Corolla, that's all we need to get. Which don't exist.
I have had some sleep. We got the regional harbour master from Canterbury to come up. So we've had a team of 41 people from multiple agencies coming in.
The vessel now safely docked, but it could have been much worse. It could have happened further into the journey.
Had this happened out in Cook Strait, in open waters, these wouldn't have been the tugs that we needed. We would have needed an open sea rescue tug.
There are 2 tugs in Picton, and they played a big role this weekend.
Like any other port in New Zealand, our expertise is in berthing and unberthing ships, so our tugs are harbour tugs.
So are Wellingtons, and they're not designed for the open ocean.
They have capability to respond in an emergency.
It is fascinating. I guess the reality is it would be good to have tugs that can work out in the ocean as well, but it is interesting that they're going to, we need a tug to go into the ocean when it breaks down, rather than let's get something new that's not likely to break down. So, I mean, I get it, because new things can break down. People who have bought new cars, in fact, we were talking on Friday night about people who bought new cars and within, 100 kilometres of buying them, they're broken. It can happen. But also getting a more reliable new Corolla, Nicola, might also be a solution, rather than trying to find a way to mitigate an ailing, broken infrastructure as well.
But they've got limited capability.
Last year, the Kaitaki lost power in the Cook Strait with 800 people on board and was just minutes from a major disaster. A few months later, a container ship got into trouble off fuel spit, an ocean-capable tug from Taranaki, eventually towing it back to Wellington. Last month, the government put aside $600,000 for
I can't go back because it'll
for an open
it's a live show, but yeah, significant, eh?
One News understands the key issues are who would pay for it and how it would be staffed.
Isn't that the key problem for this national government? Remember, this is the role of the right. When they're in opposition, they say government doesn't work. Government's not responsible enough to provide services to the public. Then they get into government and they pass legislations, or they cancel purchases that cause that goods or service to fail. Then they sit back and they go, yep, see, we always told you it wasn't going to work. Privatization is the answer. Who will pay for it? How will it be staffed? It's an interesting question, Chewie. Yeah. Very interesting question.
staffed. While it's hoped it would be really needed, a crew would need to be available at a moment's notice to respond to an unfolding event.
The place and the location of this incident, we're very fortunate that it was close, so we could put tugs on scene really quickly.
A lucky break, keeping the ferry service afloat for now. Jessica Roden, One News.
And they go straight into the Prime Minister's comments as well, so we'll stick with it.
Operating within 5 years. Christopher Luxon says reports suggest the current inter-islander ferries will reach the end of their useful life before the end of the decade. He says they'll need to be replaced by then at the latest.
Different analysis and reports I've seen suggest 2029, but having said that, you know, we'd like to push as fast as we can to get a good, viable...
How's 2026, Christopher? We could have had some by 2026. Would that be as fast as we can?
Solution in place.
And Luxon says the weekend's incident hasn't made him regret cancelling a deal which would have delivered 2 new ferries in 2026. He says a cost blowout meant the deal didn't stack up.
So there's the basic story. Go, Chewie. Go.
This is the thing that's fucking me off. Every time the media talks about the IREX ferries, they talk about this massive cost blowout.
Yeah.
They are telling half the story. The ferries prices were locked in. They were negotiated. They were 40% cheaper than they would be now. The cost blowout was on building the port facilities, more resilient port facilities, more resilient against earthquakes. Picton and Wellington, the thing that joins them together, apart from the ferry route, is the fault line they fucking sit on.
Yeah.
This isn't reckless, frivolous spending. This is critical national infrastructure that handles billions of dollars of freight every year. And we end up in this small-minded place where the country never grows. We can never do things ourselves, and we mustn't ever have anything new. This second-hand Corolla fucking chat of like, let's treat this country like a poor family.
Yeah.
Deciding that they might need to upgrade a car is just foolish. I want a government that sees the country that we could be and do the things that we are capable of. And this is so predictable. I woke up to stories today, again, maybe the solution is to privatize because Kiwi Rail clearly can't handle their shit. Maybe trying to service a 25-year-old ferry nearing the end of its life is more difficult and more expensive the older it gets. It's our only rail-enabled ferry. It's laughable that we're going down this. These guys are being economic vandals, and they should be lashed by this. News came out today that it wasn't the case that no work had been done on the ferries. Hyundai were putting together engine components and spray painting steel plates for the hull. Now, we can't go cap in hand back to Hyundai and go, actually, we made a mistake. We paid hundreds of millions of dollars to cancel that contract, and we get nothing because it's too expensive. But we've spent $1 million so far in consultation fees to work out whether we can do a 4-kilometre long 4-lane tunnel under Wellington, which everybody agrees is a laughable pie-in-the-sky boondoggle. So the party of money and the party of making sure taxpayer dollars are used most effectively have spunked all this money up the wall for tax cuts for landlords. And they're talking about how important roads are, even though that plan ballooned out by billions of dollars. But suddenly designing a ferry for our conditions that'll last decades and handle our increased population and handle rail freight without having to bring the train in, take the stuff off the train, put the stuff on the ferry, take it to Wellington, take it out of the train, truck it to where the train is. You know, it's why are these guys still there? It's clown shoes behavior.
So let's just pick up on what you've just said there, because whilst people are kind of going, well, it's going to be the same because they're just going to be smaller ferries. This is from the weekend, like this is Saturday or Sunday. The government's independent advisory group has recommended brand new Cook Strait ferries similar in size to the current fleet, One News understands. Last week, ministers received a report from the group in which it's understood options were laid out for the specifications of the new ferries and when they could arrive. The group has recommended that the ferries be smaller than the proposed IREX ferries and not rail enabled, although rail would still be able to be shunted on the vessels as often happens now. It's understood, funnily enough, Chewie, you reliable second-hand Corolla, well, it's understood second-hand ships were not an option on the table. But ministers were said to be considering whether Kiwi Rail would buy the ferries, here's the warning people, or a different entity would handle the purchase. Now, Chewie, what you just said as well, right, about it was all costed out. So this is what's going to happen, whānau. I almost guarantee it. I bet Chewie's life on it. Is that imagine you were in a contract through COVID to get a 3-bedroom house built. Right? Signed, sealed, delivered, was done. You were done. It was going to cost you $1 million. And of course, jib went through the roof. Prices went through the roof through COVID. Doesn't matter. You've got a contract at the end of COVID when they finished it. Let's say it's getting finished for Christmas. It's going to cost you $1 million. If you try and build the same house today, it's going to cost you $1.5 million. So actually, you can either spend more to build the same house today, or you can get a lesser product, let's say a 2-bedroom house, or on a smaller set or a smaller footprint, for the same money. That's what's going to happen with the ferries. The ferries are either going to be smaller and not service us as well because they won't be rail enabled for the same money, or they're going to cost more. That's what's going to happen. We said that's what was going to happen, and it's what's going to happen. The other thing, Chewie, that I wanted to mention, which I don't quite understand, right? This is from the press over the weekend as well. Now, I just highlighted the word billion because it's a fun word to highlight. Part of this article called New Zealand to the back of the queue for new Cook Strait ferries. From having them built for us to the back of the queue. The government in December cancelled an order for 2 new ferries, which would have been getting built now due to a $2 billion budget blowout, right? That's what they said. Now, further on in this article, and I don't understand this, it says this. Over the weekend, Transport Minister Simeon Brown announced that the government has ensured funding is available to purchase new ships. Oh, that's good. I wonder how much they've got. While Willis said that there was a $7.5 billion multi-year capital allowance that the new ferry funding would come from. So if there's a $7.5 billion multi-year capital allowance, what are you going to do now? Spend $1.8 billion on a lesser product because you wouldn't spend $2 billion on the Ferrari. So here we go. This is what's going to now happen, Nicola, you second-hand Ferrari. You're going to fucking buy a second-hand Ferrari. Well, let's be honest. You're going to buy a new Corolla, not a second-hand Corolla, a new Corolla, right? But you're going to pay as much for it as someone who would have bought a Ferrari. That's what's going to happen. You're going to pay Ferrari prices for a Corolla product. That's what's happening. Dumb shits.
This whole thing reeks of just going after a project because Labor has done it. Like, by all accounts, Labor did absolutely everything correctly with tendering out these ferries. They investigated what they needed. They looked at outside issues like lowering our carbon emissions. You know, a big thing about these ferries is that they were diesel electric. They had a whole bunch of batteries that could be charged and while they're at port and charged by diesel generators, and you could expand the battery packs at a later date to make it even more electric. You know, they did all of these things that all had benefits to our carbon obligations as well. They negotiated a great deal from Hyundai, one of the top shipyards in the world. And it was long-term thinking. And this just seems to be a thing that we will get a left government and we get long-term multi-generational thinking, and then we get national and it's cut. Any project that Labor had their fingerprints on, whether it was good or bad or middling, cut.
Yeah.
These guys wanted to tell a story about a poorly managed project by Labor with a massive cost blowout. And at no point have they acknowledged that there were two parts to this. And the other part of it is it's infrastructure, critical infrastructure in quake-prone places. It would have lasted us generations.
Yeah.
And we've chucked the baby out of with the bathwater. And as you said, we're going to be paying close to the same amount for less capable things. And if you're a ship maker, and the New Zealand government comes to you and says, hey, look, we need to buy some ships. And you can go, well, I heard what you did to Hyundai, so who knows whether this is going to go through. So we're not going to give you a good deal because we don't trust you. Like, I would love to be in the delegation that turned up at Hyundai and go, actually, mate, we've changed our minds. We'd like to get those ships. Thanks. And Hyundai goes, get fucked. We're busy. Economic vandals, absolute clown shoes.
Okay, so I've just written it down to get this right. This is the National Party, branding for 2026. Spend the same money today for a Corolla that would have purchased a brand new Ferrari 6 months ago. Vote National 2026.
And I've just realised that I haven't mentioned at all that this plays into the Tory playbook of take a state-owned institution, run it into the wall, point at them and go ineffective, corrupt, incompetent. The only solution, because we've only got 3 years before the bottoms of these ships start falling out, the only option that we've got is private enterprise.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be looking at an overseas company that somebody's a shareholder and swoop in and save the day, look really good for a couple of years, and then start really extracting profit. Yeah. And if we're talking about freight between countries, one day there'll be countries, between islands, then you're looking at it affecting prices. And then we'll have to look back and go, what fucking shower of idiots caused this easily foreseeable situation? And it's going to be old man Chewie and old man Pat sitting on our porches, pointing at you, go, we fucking told you so.
Fucking told you, sons. Kia ora again, team. Thanks for sticking with us. Hope you're enjoying the best of 2024 as we take a bit of a break through this 2024-2025 Christmas New Year period. Very, very important people to us from our audience are our patrons. Our patrons help pay the bills, especially through this Christmas period where we're not doing as much merch and we're not getting super chats and stuff. It's the people who are our patrons who get behind us and who help us pay for all the stuff that you're doing and watching right now, all the technology we're using, all the internet we're using, the power for what we're doing. It's all based on what the patrons do. If you are interested in being a part of what we do, patreon.com/Big Hairy News, patreon.com/Big Hairy News is how you do it, as we aim to continue bringing you this independent news network right the way through 2025 and beyond. Thanks for your support, and however you do it, even if it's just watching and sharing, it's really important to us. And let's get back to the best ofs. Let's wrap up the week with something from a couple of days ago, because it'll be lovely to end up with a little bit of, Mr. Luxon being a bit pissy when he gets asked questions about farm-make funding. So this was on RNZ with Corinne a couple of days ago. You may have seen clips of this online. There's a couple of people who really clunked it down to its bare 60 seconds. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes to listen to here. And the question, because like we said at the start of the show, it's valid to say your position has changed so much on the paying for these drugs. The drugs are great. We still just want to know about how you got there. That's really what the conversation's about.
When did you make the decision to go with the current model rather than your election policy? Because obviously it should have been in this year's budget, not next year's budget. So when was that decision made?
Yeah, look, it's something that we've been working through over the last few months, actually, as to what's the best way to deliver it. But I'd just say to you, Corin, it's all very interesting talking about a process story. The great news is that this is a pretty unprecedented transformational historic investment. And I'm thinking of all the people that are actually going to benefit from it. And you and I will know folk that are dealing with cancer at the moment. I had 3 or 4 people in my head yesterday as I was making the announcement, thinking this is fantastic news. So, look, I mean, the key thing is that I'm interested in is the new Prime Minister of a new government is that we deliver on our promises. And we made a commitment. We were very committed to getting cancer drugs. The means by which we delivered those ends was different. But the key thing is we even surprised, I think people were getting more treatments available, which is a really good outcome.
I appreciate that you are defensive of the process because you have faced a lot of criticism and you have acknowledged mistakes with the communication, but the timing is important. And it is important for New Zealanders to understand why you thought naming cancer drugs in the election campaign was a good idea, despite experts saying that undermines the Farm Act process. So it is important that we know when you made that change and why it wasn't in the current budget.
Well, what I'd say, Corin, and what was important is that we wanted to be committed to actually finding more cancer treatments for New Zealanders, right, in opposition. That was our desire. We wanted to make sure that we could get drugs that were available in Australia to New Zealanders that would have a benefit for them. We could look at running and setting up a separate process outside Farm Act.
And you didn't think that would be undermining of the Farm Act process at that time? You thought you could do that without undermining Farm Act?
The basic premise is this, Chewie. It's like we're going... I don't, and I guess when I say it's fair enough they do this, it's the political game. It's like we've got a great result, right? The team has won, but we're still interested in how the game was played, right? I can get up in the morning and see the score from the game last night, and that can be the end of it. Or I can want to watch the whole game and see how we got to that score. And in this, the country wants to know how you got there. And because it's our money, remember, we don't use taxpayers' money like an ATM. That's what you said, Mr. Luxon. We want to know how you got to get to the ATM and find $600 million. We're not just going to look at the score. We're going to look at the process to the score. Was it a good game? Were there red cards? Okay, my analogy is falling apart now.
And outcomes, Corin, we're really interested in outcomes and results. And so the means by which we deliver those results, they can change. But the bottom line is we delivered on a commitment and we actually surprised on the commitment. That's what matters to me. And so it's great in opposition that we had an idea of a proposal to deliver more cancer drugs to Kiwis. It changed by how we've actually delivered it. But that's not the issue. The issue is actually have we delivered on the promise and said what we would do for New Zealanders, and we have. And we've hit this and we've made a big, we've worked really hard.
It's not entirely true. They did what they did, sort of, but they had to do it in a new way. They had to pay a lot more money to get to their promise because they promised something that they couldn't deliver legally before the election. So, okay, so you did what you said you were going to do, but at a cost to the country of a lot more, which we're okay with because we want the drugs, but you're just not prepared to, you're not showing your workings, Mr. Luxon. You've got to the exam, you've just written the answers all the way through, and the teacher's going, show us your workings, and you're refusing to. It's not okay. I will find a third analogy before this is finished, I promise you.
To make sure we find a way in a process.
After a major backlash and a lot of angst for cancer patients who had been factoring this in the budget.
Yeah, and I just say, Corin, isn't it great? Because the government has made a $12.7 billion investment in healthcare. We cleaned up a $1.8 billion Farm Act fiscal cliff. We put $600 million. This is where it starts to get a bit pissy. You can hear it. And 28 other new medicines that are going to benefit 175,000 people. So isn't that fantastic?
Isn't that fantastic? Yes, it is. And people, as I say, people have welcomed that. But there is criticism of, for example, of the funding here. You are putting this into the next budget. You've only got $2.4 billion in your operating allowance. You're now going to have to allocate some of that to this new announcement. Can you give a cast iron guarantee to New Zealanders that you will not spend more than that $2.4 million in your allowance because the credit rating agencies are watching?
Well, I'll just say to you, Corin, we're a government that understands financial management and economic management, unlike the last crowd for the last 6 years. Yes, we've inherited a difficult situation. Yes, you saw our budget laid out in terms of what our intention is with operating allowances going further. Are there, in fact, more savings in government spending? Absolutely. Will that be daily practice? Absolutely.
Cuts.
We want to make sure every dollar that comes to government spending is deployed in the most efficient, best way it possibly can be. So there'll be an ongoing program of savings that we expect to come out of government spending. Yes, we know we've put ourselves on very tight diet on operating allowances, and we'll do what we continue.
Is that
to
a
do.
commitment to stick to 2.4 billion or not?
Well, yes. I mean, that's what we've said in the budget. We are working to make sure we deliver on our operating allowances. Unlike the last.
Remember, $2.4 billion is what that's working allowances. So what Corin Dan is saying is you've already taken $600 million out of that, and you haven't even got there yet. So and he's pledging to stick by it. And of course, Labor bad.
This crowd that end up overspending them by $600 million on average each and every year for 6 years.
Okay, we'll hold you to that. Come budget time next year.
Understands economic management, Corin.
Okay, as I say, we and the credit rating agencies, which have warned after your budget that they are concerned about the ability of governments to stick to their operating allowances.
Just say to you, isn't it fantastic to have a new government?
Isn't it fantastic?
And will actually be better for New Zealand and make sure our economic and our fiscal situation.
I should point out that they did also note the tax policy as a factor.
Isn't it great? I mean, the fact that we've got hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders that we're supporting, low and middle income workers that are getting tax relief as well. And I just encourage everyone to jump on the tax calculator, see what your benefit and help is. Isn't it great that our government is able to save money, reprioritise money, invest in frontline services and give New Zealanders tax relief? I think that's a fantastic thing.
I guess the only thing I'd say to that, Chewie, is, isn't it great? Now, just to show you how this is their new line, I'll give you 30 seconds of Simeon Brown from today. See if you can pick up on it.
But you do accept that it could be more expensive for people to be driving with the congestion charging than it would be with the Auckland regional
Well, I'd just say the regional fuel tax is getting removed on the 1st of July, and that is great news for Aucklanders.
There you go. So there's their new tactic, right? Whoever their PR team is, you have to go out and tell people that everything's great. If you tell them it's great, they'll believe you. Don't say, if you get given a question, even if you have to take too long a pause, Mr. Luxon, end up by saying, life's great. It's great. Isn't it great? Isn't it great? There you go, Joey.
Isn't it great that whenever these guys get a new tactic, that they stick to the script so fucking completely and don't mix it up?
Yep.
It's like an amateur dramatics production.
And isn't it great that when they do that, we're the first people in New Zealand media to pick up on it, like the Ferries. Remember that 2 breakfast shows talking about the second-hand Corollas? Isn't it great?
What I would say to you, Pat, is that isn't it great that I've still got years of linking this back to the previous government? Just, my God, this is a new and organic thought that I've just had.
Very good.
Christopher Luxon is not very good at this.
I think I've heard that somewhere before. I'm not sure where, though.
It's funny because when you're not a politician and you spend a lot of time in middle management and deodorant company and inheriting an airline and all you have to do is basically not fuck it up too bad.
Yep.
You don't have to field press questions a lot and you're not very good at dealing with it. And when they keep on going, well, here's a question, and you pivot to your new tactic that the man with a clipboard told you would really, really work, and it doesn't work because you outright don't answer the fucking question you've just been asked, and the interviewer comes back for a second pass. He's still not falling for the "isn't it great" soundbite, and you look confused, and you look off to the man with the clipboard, and he's going, "Well, fuck, I don't know, mate. Do the hits." Oh, what I'd like to say to you is, I think I've been perfectly clear. I'm a man made of preamble and no substance. Like the whole Farm Act thing. Yes, it's good that people are getting.
Isn't it great?
It's great.
It's great.
It's great, Pat.
It's fantastic.
People are getting their medicines. But what we're really concerned about here, and here's your third analogy, Pat. Sometimes it's important to know how the sausage is made. Was the sausage planned? Was the appropriate ingredients for the sausage procured ahead of time?
Was it
Were
roadkill?
the correct ingredients at all? Or was the sausage made by a panicked man who shouldn't be in the butchery flinging meat randomly until a sausage appears. Because that's what this government feels like it's doing. It's working to a plan that isn't costed, planned out at all. Then people get really big mad, and then they fucking like raiding next year's budget because you forgot the promise that you made for this year's budget is mental. It's not good management, and the fact that these guys are still trying to hammer home the point that they're good economic managers is ridiculous. And it is insane that people still think that this is the party of business, the party of the economy.
So last night we talked about the One News poll. We kind of talked about not talking about it because it's a bit of a waste of time, to be really honest, talking about how many seats. And I believe Mikey Sherman said something like, which gives them the right to continue to have a mandate. It's like, no, just because the right bloc has got enough to hypothetically make a new government, that doesn't continue to give them the right. They got the right at the last election, and they don't lose that right until either the coalition falls over or they call a snap election. They're the only two possibilities, not a full term. But the one thing that is interesting about the numbers is when they're talking about leaders and the leadership numbers, because the leadership numbers are not necessarily about seats in the House. They're about how the country is feeling about these people right now. So there is a bit more interest with how does the country feel about these people? Because remember, I don't know whether it was One News or News Hub or one of those groups, but the last time they did this, Christopher Luxon was at historic lows for where he was at as a preferred prime minister. You know, because you often have that honeymoon period where everyone, quote unquote, everyone loves you. And his numbers were lower at that point than like the previous 5 prime ministers after an election. But they talked tonight again about the preferred prime minister numbers and the plus minuses. So let's have a bit of a look of what the results are.
How are you? They hold the 2 most prominent roles in New Zealand politics, but...
Was that Chippy and the horse? Those two, they hold them, is it?
I would vote for Chippy and the horse.
Those two. They hold the 2 most prominent.
Look at the tiny wee horse.
The tiny horse.
Look at the tiny wee horse.
Or Chippy's had a real growth spurt. Could be that as well.
Giant Chippy. Normal size horse.
New Zealand politics, but do voters think they're hitting the mark?
Well, that one made a mess of the country, put it into the crap.
Prefer him to that prick.
They've both got very different jobs.
In our poll, we asked voters to rate them. 40% approve of the job Christopher Luxon is doing.
That's not terrible. It's not good, but it's not terrible. But
as Prime Minister, but 45% disapprove. Approve minus disapprove gives him a rating of -5. For Chris Hipkins, nearly half approve of the job he's doing as opposition leader, while just over a third disapprove, giving him a rating of 13.
now we can keep going, but you know the next part of the conversation is putting the microphone in front of the people and them all going, well, polls don't really matter now. But I'm interested in talking to this. This is really the crux of the conversation, to be honest with you. I think whilst it means nothing in the kind of the broader picture of government, of passing legislation, of all that, it is fascinating to see like a freshly won election putting together, you know, policies and legislation that the right bloc in general should love, and he's still so unpopular. You know, he's still a -5. And look, even if you get the -5, you know, he's behind Chris Hipkins on approval ratings, just 40 to 47, even if you look at that. The opposition, the former Prime Minister, 6 months, 8 months into a new term, is 7 points ahead of you in the approved stats. It's got to be gutting. No matter what you say, it's got to be gutting.
And look, I think I'm going to sort of echo what some in the chat are saying. What's Chippy actually been doing? Like, he's not getting a fraction of the press that Luxon is.
He got a big bump when he came on here. I wonder how much we got credit for that. Yeah.
That's scientific. You can just fucking link that. Don't look it up. But I think this is just the thing with Luxon is he doesn't come off authentic no matter what persona or mask he's putting on.
Yeah.
You know, he's tried most recently the tough, decisive leader of we're doing boot camps and I don't care what you think. Some leaders can pull that off. He can't.
Yeah.
He's trying to be relatable. He can't do that either. If I ran into him, I don't know what his real personality is. Is it? It can't be this, can it?
Vicky says that's a good way of looking at it as well. Vicky, 18 points ahead because 13 minus 5 is 18 between them. I wonder of the 45% disapprove for Mr. Luxon, I predict 44% of those people went there and stayed there when he said, I want to get all my aces in their places. I reckon they all went then, and since then they've never come back. That's what my prediction is.
Yeah, look, and sort of following on from what I just said, look, I honestly believe that what we see of Chippy is him. He does come off as authentic. When we had him on the show the other week, I thought we got a very candid Chris Hipkins. We just straight up asked him, are there lessons to be learned from the election? And he pretty much just copped to the fact that yes, there are.
Yeah, we fucked up in a more political way.
Yeah. But it felt honest though, even though the language was, of course, it was a politician language. It felt authentic. Now, if Luxon wants to convince him that we are getting the true authentic Luxon, we've had the leader of the opposition on. Maybe we could have the leader of the country on. If he's not too busy.
I often write down questions to ask people. And I've got a pretty big file for Luxon now.
That'd be fun. Thanks for coming on the show, Chris. Right, question 1.
Hang on. I got to go back 7 pages to get to my first question. Yeah. Right, here we go. Yeah. I mean, I think remember that all of this talk, as I think fair as it is, and especially when it comes to criticism of Luxon and how the country's saying, all of those things being equal, they still get to make whatever policy they want.
Yeah.
So actually, that's why these polls really don't mean anything, especially the ones about seats in the House. These ones now show us the country doesn't like this dude, but 8 months ago they hated Jacinda more. Enough of them hated Jacinda more that they put in a guy that they fucking hate. I mean, think about that. I mean, we're going to play a bit from Bomber shortly, and he talks about rat fucking. Are they rat fucking the public service enough? It's kind of that's sort of the response that that the country gave to Labour. It's like, see this guy, this bald guy? He's the worst fucking choice ever. We hate him, and we're going to vote for him and get you guys out. All right, team, that's us for another episode. We'll continue these best ofs right the way through till we start going live again on Monday, the 13th of January. If you've enjoyed this show, then you can thank, along with me, our patrons. Our patrons are the ones who are responsible for being able to bring this to you, who have also kept us independent and free from any kind of outside pressure from outside sources. In the week leading up to our break, so in the week leading up to the 20th of December, these patrons joined in those 7 days. Gray, Dr. Nat, Kathleen, Jimmy's Nan, Cezanne Big Q, Caleb Watson, Lance Juverton, Ed Hyde, Howard Vicarage, Doris Queener, Kiwi Bear, Syntax Error, Rena KH, Kerry Moses, Max Power, and Sue Locke. All those people joined in the 7 days leading up to when we went on break. If you have joined since then, you will not see your name in the credits because this is a pre-record. Probably will see your name in the credits in the last week of pre-record because I will update it. I also want to mention David Thompson Rules, who in those 7 days, he also upped his membership. He upped levels from, I think patron to super patron. So thanks to David Thompson for doing that as well. If you've enjoyed what you've seen tonight, if you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to be in the credits that are about to roll, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Stay safe out there in New Zealand. Remember, driving 5 kilometres per hour slower will only get you there a couple of minutes later. Don't take risks on the roads, and we will see you when we come back live again on the 13th of January as you continue to enjoy the best of the best of the best ofs here in BHN.